We've all stared at the typing indicator, waiting for a reply that never comes. The typing indicator is exactly like a gambling addict watching a roulette wheel spin. You're hooked on the anticipation, not the message. Right now, real, loving relationships are being completely destroyed by messages that were never even sent. Therapy is full of people harboring deep resentments because of a typing bubble that disappeared months ago. When you see those three little dots pulsing on your screen, your heart rate spikes for 4 whole minutes. It's the exact same physiological response as facing a wild predator. But the most disturbing part isn't the anxiety, it's what your brain secretly does when the message never arrives. If you're tired of living in a cycle of anxiety over messages that never come, stick with me until the end of this video and you'll get the mental off switch that instantly neutralizes the anxiety of waiting for a text and stops you from projecting your deepest fears onto a blank screen before it ruins your love life.
There is something that happens to your brain every single time you see those three little dots appear on your screen. Something that tech companies have studied, tested, and know exactly what it triggers in you. And it has a scientific name, but I need to tell you the end of this story first, because if I start at the beginning, you're going to think I'm exaggerating. Researchers measured the heart rate of people watching the typing indicator appear and disappear without any message arriving. The result? 4 minutes of elevated heart rate, the same physiological pattern measured in people confronting a real threat, from 3 dots on a screen. And the most disturbing part isn't even that. The most disturbing part is what your brain does after with that message that never came. Because it doesn't disappear, it stays. And over the next 12 minutes, I'm going to show you exactly what happens inside you and why you will probably never look at typing the same way again after today. But before we get there, before we get to the part nobody explains, I need to show you what's happening inside your brain right now. Because while you're watching this video, that process has already started. There's a region deep in the center of your brain called the nucleus accumbens. It's the same region that lights up when a gambling addict watches the roulette wheel spin. Not when he wins, when he waits. And every single time you see the typing indicator appear, that region, without your permission, without your knowledge, releases dopamine. Not because of the message, because of the anticipation of the message. Now think about this. If your brain releases dopamine while waiting, what does it do when the wait ends without a reward? That question has an answer, but it's not the answer you're expecting. I'll get there, but first, in 1927, a Russian psychologist named Bluma Zeigarnik made a simple observation in a restaurant in Berlin. The waiters remembered with perfect clarity every order that hadn't been delivered yet.
But the orders that had already been delivered, gone from memory almost instantly. She tested this in a laboratory and confirmed something that changed psychology forever. Incomplete tasks take up more cognitive space than completed ones. Your brain treats open information like files it cannot close. And it keeps those files in an active loop, consuming mental energy until they're resolved. Now you're starting to understand what happens with the deleted message, right? But I still haven't told you the scariest part. Because the Zeigarnik effect alone would be manageable. The problem is when it combines with something George Loewenstein discovered in the 90s. George Loewenstein, a behavioral economist at Carnegie Mellon, proposed something radical. Curiosity isn't pleasurable, it's painful. When we realize there's information we don't have and desperately want, what we feel isn't a mild desire, it's real psychological pain. He called it the information gap, and he demonstrated that the intensity of that pain is proportional to the perceived distance between what we know and what we want to know. Think about what happens when you see typing for 8 minutes and the message disappears. The Zeigarnik effect keeps the file open. Loewenstein's information gap theory ensures that keeping that file open is physically painful. And the nucleus accumbens keeps releasing dopamine in anticipation of a resolution that never comes. You are literally addicted to a loop of pain and anticipation generated by 3 dots. But I still haven't told you the worst part. I still haven't told you what happens to the message after it disappears. Because it doesn't disappear inside your brain, it just changes location. Let me answer the question I asked earlier. What does your brain do when the wait ends without a reward? It recalibrates the target of the search. When there's no external message to receive, the reward anticipation system, that same dopamine system, doesn't shut off. It redirects the search inward.
Your own brain starts generating the message, and this is where things get serious. Researchers call this process anxious narrative construction, and what has been documented is disturbing. The human mind, when faced with incomplete information, tends to fill the gaps with emotionally intense content. Not neutral, not probable, intense. Because survival systems weren't built to process neutral possibilities, they were built to detect threats. So the imagined message is always extreme. Either she completely forgives you or she destroyed you. Never, "Oh, I was just going to ask about the weekend." But now I need to open something much bigger, because everything we've covered so far only describes how your brain processes typing. But there's a question that no analysis of this topic ever asks, and it's the most important one of all. Why is it that the message your brain imagines has the specific content it has? Why is it that for some people the deleted message always speaks of abandonment, for others of betrayal, for others of rejection? Why does each person imagine a completely different message, specific, detailed, emotionally loaded? There is an answer to that, and it reveals something about you that you probably never wanted to know. But I need to show you one more thing before we get there, because there's a social mechanism that makes all of this even more complicated, and it involves something you might be doing right now without realizing it. Let me tell you something that social neuroscience research has recently documented. When you watch the typing indicator, when you see those 3 dots and wait, you're not just waiting for text, you are reading the other person in real time. And that reading process is extraordinarily sophisticated. You process the speed of typing. Too fast might mean indifference. Too slow might mean hesitation. You notice the pauses. Did she stop because she's thinking or because she's deleting? You calculate the total time. Why is it taking so long if it's something simple?
All of this happens below the level of conscious awareness, in milliseconds, without you noticing. And it's legitimate because you're human, and humans are extraordinarily good at social reading. The problem is that this system was developed for faces, voices, body language, not for digital interfaces with 3 pulsing dots. So what happens? Anxious cognitive projection. You're not reading the other person, you're projecting onto those digital signals your own fears, your own insecurities, your own hopes. And the higher your emotional intelligence, the more sensitive you are to relationships, the more intense that projection becomes. The people most capable of deep human connection are the most vulnerable to digital suffering. Now everything is converging. The pain of the information gap makes this physically unbearable. The projection system fills the void with your deepest fears, and the imagined message gets stored with surgical emotional precision. And there's one more thing, something that makes all of this irreversible if you don't understand what you're about to hear. Because the imagined message, the one that never existed, can destroy real relationships. There are documented cases in couples therapy where one partner carries deep resentment over things the other never said. When investigated, the origin was a typing indicator observed months earlier.
A message that never existed destroyed a real relationship. And now we've reached the part nobody explains, the part I've been promising since the beginning. What is really happening when that message disappears, and why it matters to you personally today in the most important way possible. Jaak Panksepp was an affective neuroscientist, someone who studied basic emotions in the mammalian brain, and he mapped something he called the seeking system. Unlike the pleasure system, which activates when you receive something good, the seeking system activates during the search itself, in exploration, in anticipation, in the very process of looking.
It's the system that makes rats explore mazes even when there's no reward at the end. It's the system that keeps humans searching something on the internet at 2 in the morning when they should have been asleep hours ago. It's the system that has no off switch. And every time the typing indicator appears, and especially when it disappears without a message, the seeking system wakes up completely. Because there is something to be found, information, an intention, an explanation. When the external message doesn't arrive, the seeking system doesn't stop. It turns inward and begins searching through your internal files. Here is the insight I promised. The imagined message is not about the other person. It never was. It is the result of the seeking system rummaging through your most accessible files, which are your most active fears, your most present insecurities, the connections you value most and fear losing most. The message you imagined would be sent is a precise portrait of what you love most, because the survival system prioritizes protecting what matters most. You didn't discover what the other person was going to say. You discovered what you're most afraid to hear. And that discovery is more valuable than any message that could have arrived. Most people spend their entire lives staring at typing indicators with anxiety, trying to decode the other person's intentions, without realizing the other person has already left the equation. What's happening is an intimate monologue, a conversation you're having with yourself using the other person's silhouette as a projection surface. When you change the question from "What was she going to say?" to "What did I imagine she was going to say, and what does that reveal about me?" something extraordinary happens. Not because you finally got the missing information, but because you realize the information that was truly missing was always inside you. The typing/deleted is not a window into someone else's interior. It is a mirror.
And most people spend their whole lives angry at the mirror, without realizing they were looking at themselves. Now you know what those 3 dots really are. They're not a threat. They're an invitation to the most important conversation you'll have today. The one that happens when you put your phone down, look at what you imagined, and finally ask, what does this tell me about what I need? If this video made you think of someone, of a conversation, of something you waited for that never came, take that with you, not as anxiety, as information. If you made it this far, you know this topic goes much deeper than it seems. In the next video, we're going to talk about something directly related to this, about how digital silence is interpreted by the same system that processes physical rejection. It's not a video about technology, it's a video about you. See you there.